In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get 250,000 miles on your new EV without having to replace the battery. What's up guys, Mitchell Watts and welcome back to Drive Electric. And today we're gonna jump into all of the maintenance that you should be considering when you're about to buy a brand new electric vehicle. So the first thing that I wanna do is I wanna bust up all of the different myths about, hey, an electric vehicle is not going to last a long time. It's just a matter of time before I have to replace the battery in that thing. Well, first off, let's talk about the longevity. So we'll just use a Ford Mustang Mach-E, or you could even call it an F-150 Lightning as an example right now. They have a charge of about 260 miles worth of range on a singular charge. What a lot of people don't realize is the current technology that they debuted these vehicles with allows for 1,000 charge cycles on that battery. Now, a lot of people think that a charge cycle is every time you plug it in. That's not the case. A charge cycle is from completely empty to completely full. That's one charge cycle. So if you happen to plug it in and you only increase the battery by 25%, that is 1/4 of one charge cycle. So in theory, that vehicle that gets 260 miles worth of charge and it's rated for 1,000 charges, that battery is good for 260,000 miles. Now, let me show you exactly how you can get that kind of range on your vehicle. Now, please keep in mind that there's a lot of different battery technologies that are coming out very, very soon. We are talking about some of the legacy battery technologies that is currently found in the Ford vehicles. Now, in these technologies, you are looking at a battery that doesn't necessarily like to charge all the way to full. But what's weird though is that Ford Motor Company gives you conflicting information. In one hand, you've got some trainers that are saying, oh, you need to charge the battery up to a maximum of 90% on a daily basis, or you need to charge it up to a maximum of 80% or 85%. I've heard a lot of different numbers. But what's crazy is that the Ford Owner's Manual actually says that you can charge it up to 100% state of charge every single time. Why is Ford giving us conflicting information? The reason is because the battery really isn't full when it's actually full. Case in point, the F-150 Lightning, my F-150 Lightning, has a battery capacity of about 130 kilowatt hours. It's a lot of juice you can save in there. That's the usable size and the usable amount of electricity I can store in the vehicle. But what many people don't realize is it actually has more capacity than that. It's the non-usable battery capacity. So some estimates are looking at about 145 kilowatt hours of charge available to the whole battery pack, but Ford will not allow you to charge it all the way full. Why? Because that's what's best for the battery and the battery longevity. Okay, so if charging it to 100% is not going to be the end all be all, the killer, if you will, which by the way, I personally am extremely conservative when it comes to this, and I charge mine to 80-85% because I just don't need all of that range every single day. But I digress. Let's get back to what actually causes the biggest concern for batteries long term, and that is going to be heat. So everybody has got one of these smartphones, right? And if you kind of think about what is your overall longevity, after about 2 or 3 years, you'll actually start to see a little degradation in the battery itself. And why is that? Because after 2 or 3 years, if you plug it in every single night, 365 days a year, and you do that for 3 years, guess what? That's 1,000 charge cycles. Keep that in mind. So it's not so much different than your vehicle and your phone are very, very similar. So how do you keep heat out of the battery? Well, when I say heat, I'm not talking about like, hey, I live in Alabama, which I do, or hey, I live in Texas or Arizona or whatever. What I'm talking about is the battery that is inside the battery pack. So case in point, like if you throw a fast charger on that vehicle every single time you charge, you're introducing a lot of heat consistently. That is going to be a recipe for disaster on current battery technology. By the way, there's another video on this exact same channel where we talk about a brand new set of battery technology that's coming to the market and is actually already here in some situations. If you want to watch that video, it'll be linked down below or up here in that card if you want to watch it. Anyways, let's get back to what is killing the current generation of battery. is the heat. So what are some of the practical things that you can do to minimize the amount of heat? So let's say you do a 45-minute drive every single day to work, 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back. If you have the ability to, which everybody does because Ford has got their Ford Pass Connect app, is you can actually control when that vehicle is charging. So let's put it this way. Right now it is late in the afternoon. I'm about to leave here at work when I get done making this video. And when I get home, I can plug my vehicle up to the wall, but it won't start charging. Why is that? Because I want it to have 2 or 3 hours for that battery to rest, because I'm discharging 45 minutes worth of battery. And then when I get home, that battery's got a little bit of heat to it. So I want it to naturally have an opportunity to rest, maybe 2, call it 3 hours. And what that'll do is that will actually allow the battery to cool down. And then because I've got everything set up on my Ford Smart Pass app, the truck will start charging itself when I dictated it to. Now the cool part is I use Alabama Power, which is our local power authority. The Ford Pass Connect app can actually tell when the specific times, the off-peak hours are, so it can charge not only when that battery is nice and cooled off, but also when it's the cheapest for me. So it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And if you don't know what it is, just look at your normal local utility provider and they tell you what that is, because a lot of utility providers give you an extra incentive to charge late at night when no one else is really putting stress on the grid itself. And speaking of stress on the grid, let's get back to the stress on the battery. One of the things I know I've kind of mentioned to you that Ford Motor Company says that 100% state of charge is okay. And technically, if it's in the owner's manual, it has to be okay. But one of the things you have to realize is that a lot of heat is introduced into a battery pack by taking it from 80% to 100%. It requires a lot more juice to get it from 80 to 100 than it does to get it from 60 to 80. And so if you can reduce that state of charge, the maximum state of charge, you will in fact reduce a lot less stress on that battery over the long term. So I definitely recommend don't do what the owner's manual is telling you. That sounds so weird. And just reduce it if you don't need it. I reduced mine to 85%, as I've already mentioned to you, and I only charge once every 3 or 4 days. Maybe it depends on which location of the dealership that I'm going after. But a lot of people say, well, I don't, EVs are not the best for me because the battery and it's really cold or it's really hot outside. Yes, very, very, very cold temperatures is not the best for an EV to stay stored without some kind of an exterior plug-in. In fact, what Ford is rating these batteries for is the best temperatures to store them at is anywhere between 32 degrees and 113 degrees Fahrenheit. So what do you do if you live in a situation what's outside of that? Leave it plugged in. So if you leave the vehicle plugged in and let's say it's 28 degrees Fahrenheit outside, what's going to happen is that vehicle will be able to pull just enough power off of the grid once it's done charging to maintain a safe and optimal battery temperature. And so that is one of the ways you're going to get the most amount of range in those extreme temperatures. Now, let's talk about some times and some ways to maybe get a little bit more range on your daily commute. One of the things I'd recommend you do is actually do some preconditioning. So there's a couple of different things. You have preconditioning and you have remote start. They are very, very different. So a precondition works like this. You basically tell, I think Ford calls it their departure times. I hop inside of this app and I say, hey, I leave work every day at whatever time, 6 p.m. I go to work every day at 5 a.m. in the morning or whatever the case is. And what will happen is the vehicle will automatically start to precondition the battery to make sure that you can get the maximum amount of range. It optimizes the temperature. And speaking of optimizing the temperature of the battery, is the same thing goes true for on-road. Like if you're doing a long distance trip, let's say you're driving 12 hours, and let's say you've got to stop at one of these fast chargers, and you're like, okay, I got to stop at one of these fast chargers, but I want to reduce the amount of time that I'm actually there. Well, those fast chargers introduce a lot of heat to the battery, which is no problem when you're doing long distance driving, but you just don't want to do that every single day, all day. But if you are doing that situation, you need to actually set up the navigation system inside of the Ford vehicle. And the reason for that is because if you set the end destination as that level 3 fast charger, it will actually start to dispense a certain amount of energy to either cool down or to heat up the battery, depending on the exterior temperature and the temperature of the battery itself. And so that allows you to, when you plug up, you can automatically go to that maximum charge rate instead of having to wait for the battery to warm up or to cool down to get it to that optimal temperature before it actually starts throwing juice into the side of the battery pack. All right, so we've talked about a lot and I'm kind of rambling, but I think it's good information. So let's talk about warranty information for a second. So right now, Ford Motor Company, depending on what state you live in, I think California's got a longer warranty if I'm not mistaken, but this battery technology is good for a warranty of 8 years and 100,000 miles, whichever one comes first. And what's crazy is that if that vehicle maintains less than 70% state of charge, basically a beginning life battery capacity, if it could originally hold a state of charge of 100% and now it can only do 69%, inside of that 8 years, 100,000 miles, Ford's going to replace that battery pack. They will take care of that, which is awesome to hear, because when you're talking about the manufacturing of a brand new electric vehicle, that battery pack's going to cover 40 to 50% of the overall cost to manufacture that vehicle. And so it does cost a lot of money to replace the battery. But I've had so many people say, well, how much does it cost to replace the battery pack? That's the main thing that I hear when people are like, I hate EVs, is because, well, how much is it going to cost to replace the battery pack? Well, most people don't replace the entire, what I call the monolith, the entire battery pack. That dude can get expensive. In fact, we've got a video on this channel that talks about, I think it's like, watch the video if you want to see how much it costs. It's extremely expensive. But the problem is that most of those people don't need to replace that entire pack. It comes with a casing and it comes with this and it comes with that. It comes with a lot of stuff you don't need. Instead, just replace individual modules as needed. Some of these modules are not that expensive. And so that is why I think it's extremely important to understand that when people say, oh, it's just so expensive and long-term maintenance, we don't know what that's going to cost, you don't really know. But I do know that Ford Motor Company is building out the Blue Oval City where they're going to be recycling batteries. And I really believe there's going to be a market to sell a portion of your batteries, even if they're expensive. You can sell them back to Ford Motor Company and offset some of that cost. Try and do that with a gas V8 or a gas V6. So let's talk a little bit more about the normal maintenance outside of just battery maintenance for a second. It is important to know that an electric vehicle is extremely heavy. In fact, a lot of people don't realize that an F-150 Lightning is about the same weight as an F-250 Super Duty. And that's exactly why they've got the same ply rating tires as an F-250. So what does that do? That extra weight is on top of those tires. And what ends up happening is it will cause extra wear because the vehicle's just heavier. And so it's extremely important to rotate your tires more. Now, the good news is there's no oils to change. There's no fluid to change inside the internal combustion engine because there isn't one. So basically just make sure, if my recommendation is rotate the tires every 5,000 miles or more if you're able to, but just stay consistent so that way you get the longest longevity out of that tire. But getting back to the tire itself and the ply tire, I can't talk today, but as far as the ply is concerned, it's extremely important to understand that you need that 8 or 10 ply tire because the amount of torque that's coming out of those electric motors puts a ton of pressure on the sidewall of those tires, and it can actually cause buckling on the tire. So you see some of these people that do a leveling kit or a lift kit on that particular vehicle, they put the wrong plied tire on there. Yeah, it's going to ride good. One, the tire's not going to last that long. Two, after multiple launches, who knows what's going to happen to the integrity of that tire. So I think it's extremely important to maintain your vehicle, your electric vehicle, very, very carefully. And one thing that you might also want to do if you are interested in buying a vehicle, whether you're an individual consumer, and I also know a lot of Ford dealerships just like us watch our videos on how to get better about, just how not to get screwed when you're actually buying one of these vehicles, is I would highly highly recommend incorporating some level of a high voltage battery inspection when you're either trading that vehicle in, or if you are a consumer buying it from another individual, or if you buy it as a certified pre-owned. Make sure that you look at that high voltage battery inspection, because realistically, that's like checking the oil on an old school vehicle when you're going to buy one of those. So it's very important. It's just very different. It's a completely different way of looking at vehicles. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do me one favor, hit that like button, and then I want you to watch the video that is right there. Thank you so much. Have a great day.